Hi, Emma at Gorgeous here. We're looking at how to finish a V-neck sweater, or it would work exactly the same for a round neck sweater. And we are going to look at, it's the same technique for whether we're doing the neckline or the armhole. We'll do the armhole here because it gives me the opportunity to show you how you pick up and knit horizontal stitches and the edges of the vertical rows. So without more ado, the pattern will usually, I'm not saying always, but usually it's going to say to start at the bottom of the armhole. So we've got two types of stitches here to look at. Here is the bound off stitch, which you can see on closer inspection is between two rows, so two lines of stitches. So we've got this stitch here and we've got this stitch here. We don't want to pick up the bound off. We want to pick up the stitch between the stitch, because when we turn this into a knit stitch, we're going to turn this into a knit stitch, it's going to look seamless. It's going to exactly match. This stitch is going to carry on into the next stitch. So let's just find the first stitch. That's the bound off. That's the first stitch there. You could start off in the one before, but as we're going to work all the way around, eventually we'll end up going through all of the stitches. In fact, I think it might be a better idea. I think that's actually the first stitch. So let us hook the yarn over. First stitch done. Now we're ready to get going. We are going to go into the top stitch, the V, below the bind off, into the V, and let's get ready. Okay. So into the V, and just simple knitting stitch through the V. So it's not quite a knit stitch, is it? Because you're not having to drop anything off the needle, you're just adding to the needle. So here in this stitching there's a little bit of a gap. We ignore that, we just keep going with the horizontal, looking. Now you see there's a good example. I've actually made it in the gap. So we're looking for the V. The V ends here. So if there is a little gap in your knitting, in that case that's caused by the two bind off rows, the easing of the bind off rows. You know, you normally have, like, say 6 or 8 stitches and then another 6 or 8 stitches. So don't worry about how it looks. That gap that you get from different rows of bind off will disappear because we are picking up. See, I actually can't knit and talk. I can knit and watch movies, except I don't normally know what's going on. But the problem there was I didn't go in the middle of the knit stitch, so I just went back in the middle of the knit stitch, the final knit stitch. So we're just going to knit to the end of the horizontal stitches, which is here, and then we'll look at how we handle the edges of the rows. So we're going into every single V. Okay, so we've got to the end of our horizontal stitches, and now we're going to take the last stitch at the end of the row. So, oh, that's incorrect, sorry. Yes, we're going to separate, we're going to knit into the last stitch at the end of each row. But because we're doing rows, not horizontal stitches, we need to adjust for tension on that. So the standard guide, and the one I always follow, is we're actually only picking up 3 stitches out of every 4 on the end of the row. So again, I mentioned before, it can look like you've got a gap. Well, here we're going from our bound off stitches to our next row of a knit stitch, which is slowly being decreased. So we are looking to go into the last V. That's actually looking like that's still a bound off. So let me just get rid of that bound off stitch. And then we're into the horizontal, onto the vertical stitches. So we go into the middle of the V, through the back of the knitting, and we're knitting it into the next stitch, but 1 on the end. And that's 2. Just keep looking for the V. Here we're looking, oh, here we are looking at the end, that's 3. And now we're going to skip the next stitch and we're going to go into that 1, 2. Again, we're looking at the very edge of the knitting and going into separating the last stitch from the second last. I'm going to skip a stitch, 1, 2. Just find that next stitch up. Oops, that's there. So that's 3 together. And we're going to skip that next V, and then we're going to go into the side in between the first and second stitch for the first of another set of 3. Let's do it again. So we're looking for that end last stitch, which is, you can see there, the next one is going to be here, through that last stitch, separating it. That's 3, so we'll skip a stitch, 1, I'm just taking my time to show you, because as long as you pick the stitches up and there aren't any huge gaps, you're not going to have a problem. After we've done this first row, in this example, we're going to be knit 1, purl 1, and I actually think perhaps they are, you can see they're sitting in slight sets of 3, which is fine because that's how we've knitted it we're skipping a stitch. But once we've done the next row, it will look like that. You won't be able to tell the sides. Even now you can tell that's completely invisible. So don't worry that you're skipping every 4th stitch. We're going to go all the way around and continue down the back. We'll show you some of those in a moment, but let's just get this top bit done and then we'll restart and show you how to go down. So we've got to the top and now we're going to go down the back. So whether you've knitted from your item from top to bottom or from bottom to top, when you go in one direction you're going to have the V's of the end of the rows sticking up, and when you go in the other direction down the sweater they're going to be sticking in the different direction. So it's the same rule, we're not changing anything. We've done the first stitch here. Notice that here, just where we joined the seam, it looks like a gap because that is the last stitch coming in here, but when we bring them together there's no gap, and that's another wonderful thing about these edgings. So we can take the last stitch on the row and 1, and then we go straight into the next stitch, which we can see because of the bar. These bars here are separating 3. So that's those set of 3 done. We've got a bar here. That's the stitch. We're not going to knit into that stitch. We're going to go into the next stitch. And we're going to be repeating the sequence of 3s. It's exactly the same as before. You're just looking for the bar that separates the one you're in from the next one. This is on all vertical stitches, and we've done 3, so we're going to skip. It looks like a massive skip, but no, going into the next one and on until we get round. And when we get down to the bottom, to the bound off stitches, of course we'll be knitting every stitch as we did at the start. So that's it. That is pick up and knit stitch.